On December 10th in 1690, a failed attack on Quebec and subsequent near mutiny forced the Massachusetts Bay Colony to issue the first paper currency in the history of the Western Hemisphere. France and Britain periodically attacked each other's North American colonies throughout the 17th and 18th centuries. In 1690, during one such war, Governor William Phips of Britain's Massachusetts Bay Colony made a promise he could not keep. After leading a successful invasion of the French colony of Acadia, Phips decided to raid Quebec City, promising his volunteer troops half the loot in addition to their usual pay. Soldiers were typically paid in coins, but shortages of official currency in the colonies sometimes forced armies to temporarily issue IOUs, in one case in the form of cut-up playing cards, which troops were allowed to exchange for goods and services until receiving their actual pay. Despite Phips' grand promise, he failed to take the city, returning to Massachusetts with a damaged fleet and no treasure. With a shortage of coins and nothing else to pay the troops with, Phips faced a potential mutiny. With no other option, on December 10th in 1690, the General Court of Massachusetts ordered the printing of a limited amount of government-backed paper currency to pay the soldiers. A few months later, with tax season approaching, a law was passed removing the limit on how much currency could be printed, calling for the immediate printing of more, and permitting the use of paper currency for the payment of taxes. The currency was initially unpopular for anything except paying taxes and was phased out. Within a few years, however, paper currency would return to Massachusetts. The Bank of England began issuing banknotes in 1695, also to pay for war against the French, and they became increasingly common throughout the 18th century. Paper money continued to stoke controversy throughout the early history of the United States, and it was tied to the value of gold for a surprisingly long time. It was not until 1973 that President Richard M. Nixon, our nation's 37th president, officially ended the international convertibility of the U.S. dollar into gold. It was December 10th in the year 1869, motivated more by interest in free publicity than a commitment to gender equality. Wyoming territorial legislatures passed a bill that is signed into law granting women the right to vote. Western states led the nation in improving women's suffrage, but some of them had rather unsavory motives. Though some men recognized the important role women played in frontier settlement, others voted for women's suffrage, only to bolster the strength of conservative voting blocs. In Wyoming, some men were also motivated by sheer loneliness. In 1869, the territory had over 6,000 adult males and only 1,000 females. And area men hoped women would be more likely to settle in the rugged and isolated country if they knew they were granted the right to vote. Some of the suffrage movement leaders did have more respectable reasons for supporting women's rights to vote. William Bright, a territorial legislator who was in his mid-40s, had a persuasive young wife who convinced him that denying women the vote was a gross injustice. The other major backer, Edward M. Lee, the territorial secretary who had championed the cause for years, argued that it was unfair for his mother to be denied a privilege granted to African American males. Ultimately, though, appeals to justice and equality did not pass the legislation. Most Wyoming legislators supported Bright and Lee's bill because they thought it would win the territory free national publicity and might attract more single, marriageable women to the region. Territorial Governor John A. Campbell appreciated the publicity power of the policy and signed the bill into law, making Wyoming the first territory or state in the history of the nation to grant women this fundamental right of citizenship. On December 10th in the year 1901, the first Nobel Prizes are awarded in Stockholm, Sweden, in the fields of physics, chemistry, medicine, literature, and peace. The ceremony came on the 5th anniversary of the continuance of eternity of Alfred Nobel, the Swedish inventor of dynamite and other high explosives. In his will, Nobel directed that the bulk of his vast fortune be placed in a fund in which interest would be annually distributed in the form of prizes to those who during the preceding year shall have conferred the greatest benefit on mankind. Although Nobel offered no public reason for his creation of the prizes, it is widely believed that he did so out of moral regret over the increasingly lethal uses of his inventions in war. Alfred Bernard Nobel was born in Stockholm in 1833, and 4 years later, his family moved to Russia. His father ran a successful St. Petersburg factory that built explosive mines and other military equipment. Educated in Russia, Paris, and the United States, Alfred Nobel proved a brilliant chemist. When his father's business faltered after the end of the Crimean War, Nobel returned to Sweden and set up a laboratory to experiment with explosives. In 1963, he invented a way to control the detonation of nitroglycerin, a highly volatile liquid that had been recently discovered but was previously regarded as too dangerous for use. 2 years later, Nobel invented the blasting cap, an improved detonator that inaugurated the modern use of high explosives. Previously, the most dependable explosive was black powder, a form of gunpowder. Nitroglycerin remained dangerous, however, and in 1864, Nobel's nitroglycerin factory blew up, continuing the eternity of his younger brother and several other people. Searching for a safer explosive, Nobel discovered in 1867 that the combination of nitroglycerin and a porous substance called kieselguhr produced a highly explosive mixture that was much safer to handle and use. Nobel christened his invention dynamite, for the Greek word dynamis, meaning power. Securing patents on dynamite, Nobel acquired a fortune as humanity put his invention to use in construction and warfare. In 1875, Nobel created a more powerful form of dynamite, blasting gelatin, and in 1887 introduced balisite, a smokeless nitroglycerin powder. Around that time, one of Nobel's brothers continued his eternity in France, and French newspapers printed obituaries in which they mistook him for Alfred. One headline read, quote, "The merchant of death is dead," unquote. Alfred Nobel, in fact, had pacifist tendencies and in his years later apparently developed strong misgivings about the impact of his inventions on the world. When he continued his eternity in San Remo, Italy on December 10th in 1896, the majority of his estate went towards the creation of prizes to be given annually to the fields of physics, chemistry, medicine, literature, and peace. The portion of his will establishing the Nobel Peace Prize read, quote, "One reward shall be given to the person who has done the most or best work for fraternity among nations, for the abolition or reduction of standing armies, and for the holding or promotion of peace congresses," unquote. Exactly 5 years after his continuance of eternity, the first Nobel Awards were presented. Today, the Nobel Prizes are regarded as the most prestigious awards in the world in their various fields. Notable winners have included Marie Curie, Theodore Roosevelt, Albert Einstein, George Bernard Shaw, Winston Churchill, Ernest Hemingway, Martin Luther King Jr., the Dalai Lama, Mikhail Gorbachev, Nelson Mandela, Barack Obama, and Malala, I caught up on this one, Malala Yousafzai. Multiple leaders and organizations sometimes receive the Nobel Peace Prize, and multiple researchers often share the scientific reward for their joint discoveries. In 1968, a Nobel Memorial Prize in Economic Science was established by the Swedish National Bank, Sveriges Riksbank, and first awarded in 1969. The The Royal Swedish Academy of Sciences decides the prizes in physics, chemistry, and economic science. The Swedish Royal Caroline Medical Surgical Institute determines the Physiology or Medicine Award. The Swedish Academy chooses literature, and a committee elected by the Norwegian Parliament awards the Peace Prize. The Nobel Prizes are still presented annually. Each Nobel carries a cash prize of nearly $1,400,000, and recipients also received a gold medal, as is the awesome tradition.